So this weekend, we unfortunately saw violence across America, sort of personal, individual levels of violence, mass shootings, and not just here in the United States. It's most common here, but it did happen internationally as abroad, both in war zones and in countries that very rarely see the sorts of mass gun violence that we've become so accustomed to here in the United States. And so we have to acknowledge it. We're not gonna, this is what the show does. We don't stick our head in the sand, okay? And so let's talk about a little bit of what happened over the course of this weekend. So on Saturday, we had the shooting at Brown University, tragically left 2 more students dead, 9 others injured. Ella Cook, Muhammad Aziz, Umarzakov, 2 students there at Brown. And as terrible as it is, that these people died, even worse that at least as of when we're recording this, and maybe this is changing right now, maybe it'll change later today. They thought that they had a person of interest, but then released him, and now we don't exactly know. It seems like the cops think they know the neighborhood that the person fled into, but it has been some time, and so we don't know. I still, in this time of having no faith in our government whatsoever, in these sorts of events, they still do pretty well at tracking down the person. Of course, they got the guy that killed Charlie Kirk after a manhunt, and so I think it's likely that they will get the person, but that doesn't bring the dead back. And so yet another horrible school shooting to add to the never-ending and already very long list of school shootings like that. And here's one thing that now we get to experience as a country. People having lived through not their first mass shooting, but their second or even third. Zoe Weissman was a survivor of the Parkland shooting back in 2018, and then eventually moves on and goes to Brown and experiences again. She said, I think mentally, I feel like I'm 12 again. This just feels exactly like how I felt in 2018, but honestly, I'm really angry. I'm really angry that this is happening to me all over again, and I'm just in shock. And so, that happened, and lots of stuff could be done theoretically to make it less likely in the future, but we're gonna be realistic here. You have to be realistic. Nothing will be done, nothing positive at least. So we're not gonna pretend as if anyone in a position of power is gonna take this seriously and do anything about it. We're just gonna wait for the next one. But it's not just here. In Sydney's Bondi Beach, there was a Hanukkah celebration that was the site of even more horrendous violence. At least 15 people killed, including a child. The victims ranged in age from 10 to 87 years old. No one was spared. Dozens and dozens of others that were there celebrating were injured and are now at hospitals as of this morning. And this is comparatively far more rare in Australia, this sort of violence. This is the deadliest shooting in almost 3 decades. This is a country that has much stricter gun control laws than we have here. And I have no doubt that there are conservatives here in America who will say, hey, see, it didn't matter. It didn't matter, except over the past 3 decades where they've had almost no gun violence compared to us. It mattered for then, but don't worry, the people that have no problem with people dying here in the United States will no doubt use the death of these individuals to push for even less gun control than we already have. Now, this clearly was targeting the Hanukkah celebration. So we know a little bit more about the killers here. It appears that it was a father and son, a 50-year-old man, a 24-year-old son. You don't often hear about that sort of violence, a father and son teaming up in what appears to be an explicitly religiously motivated act of violence there. And so all of this is negative. The one positive, or at least one inspirational thing that happened here, JR, was, as I'm sure you saw the video, there was a bystander who saw it happening and had that moment where you can flee for your life or you can try to do something. And that's a very risky thing to do when people are shooting like this. And he decided to jump into action and try to protect the people around him. So that footage is available. I don't believe that we can play it on the show, but it shows 43-year-old fruit shop owner Ahmed Al Ahmed in a car park. He was wearing a white shirt, charges at a man who's holding a rifle. He tackles the man from behind, wrenches the gun out of his hands, and then levels it at the terrorist. Now, he is okay. He did end up getting shot. It's a little bit loose in the details. It appears he got shot a couple of times in the shoulder, but he is still alive. Obviously terrible that he was shot. But that is just an amazing act of heroism when everything in you calls out for you to just get down on the ground, get behind something, try to protect yourself. Instead, he rushes and almost certainly saved a lot of people. And, I should probably just leave it there. I was just criticizing the anti-gun control people that would point out political stuff, but can I just mention that he was a refugee from Syria that came from Syria to Australia, father of 2 girls, and was willing to put his life on the line to save people, random people, strangers. Thank God that Australia, which by the way has its own issues with xenophobic, anti-immigration and all that stuff. I'm not saying they're perfect on that, but yet again, look at a country being strengthened by the refugees that they brought in. And so he saved people's lives. And there's gonna be interviews with him and everything. The premier of New South Wales State said that he was a genuine hero. It's one of the most unbelievable things he's ever seen. And I certainly agree with that, JR. And so that's one positive little thing amongst all this darkness. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you can probably gauge the shocked reaction that's happening in Australia from this shooting, especially to the degree it is and the number of people that were victims of it, versus the way that we react in this country to mass shootings that happen, daily on a daily basis here. It's move on, it's who cares, it's thoughts and prayers. We know that already. And it's actually arguments about whether or not we will do something about it. I mean, we got the people in charge literally saying things like, we're not gonna do anything about it. Yeah, Tim Burchett said that years ago from a shooting that happened in his state. So we can see the differences already whenever someone wants to say, well, look, they've got a gun violence problem too. They sure do. It was an issue here and it's not an issue every day. How often do you actually concern yourselves with the people that were involved in these things? How often do we actually care about the fact that these people, like you said, that woman Zoe, who's a sophomore at the school at Brown University, having to talk about how she's experienced this a couple of times. How she also mentioned there's people up in Michigan who went to that high school in Michigan and then ended up at Michigan State and experienced another. There's other folks that went to Parkland High and then also ended up down, I believe, at a school in Florida. Same thing. It's becoming very much not an uncommon thing that people who experience mass shootings will experience them again. They sit themselves in certain classroom areas. They sit themselves in certain public areas in a certain way where they can see the door. It changes people's entire lives. It changes the makeup of their brain chemistry. But we have this approach that's thoughts and prayers. Sometimes we don't expand it enough to realize how much we're assuming people need to just have some thoughts and prayers and then they move on and there's nothing else wrong anymore. But also, will we actually learn any lessons about how many guns have been filtered throughout our entire communities versus in places like Australia? Or will we be talking about how we need to be focusing on the anti-Semitism that was obvious in this shooting and then start connecting it to us here and not talk about our issues? It's an easy one to get distracted by, to then talk about how it has nothing to do with how we do things here.
You're 100% right. And we'll have more to say about some of the bad responses to these various acts of violence, including to that one having to do with the topic of anti-Semitism. But anyway, it's amazing. Like those little girls are gonna grow up knowing their father's an actual hero who's willing to die, and very well could have. Like it is very much a roll of the dice. If the guy had turned while he was creeping up on him, it could have gone very differently. And so thank God that it didn't. But we all hope, I think, that in that moment we'd be able to do that. Again, we do have to be realistic. Some people can't. Famously, Donald Trump, after Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, said that he would have ran in with no gun and saved everyone, and that's utterly ridiculous. And he definitely would not have done that. He's not 1% the man that this individual is. This individual who is a refugee, came from Syria. Donald Trump would denigrate literally all of that and imply that somehow we would be better off without people like that.